Good morning, everybody. I'm sitting here in my truck in traffic, just the south side of Wilsonville here. I thought it'd be a good time to make a video, outline my ideas for moving forward in the state of Oregon. I'll tell you that I'm not a public speaker. I'm not real polished or anything like that, so you'll have to bear with me a little bit there. But I felt it's important to talk, outline a few things, and because you can't be holding a phone and taking video and all that stuff when you're driving, especially a semi, there's nothing really to look at, but you can listen. My name is Ryan Wills. I was born out of Gold Beach on a ranch, born and raised there. Went off to college in Phoenix, Arizona, and got my associate's degree. And basically, since then, which I graduated in '98, I've been in the trucking industry, which gives you a interesting aspect of our country and our state. I have been over the road, been to almost all the lower 48 states, and I feel that the trucking industry is probably one of the, if not the most important industry in this country, because if all trucking of every sort was to shut down, this country physically could not operate. It absolutely would be devastated. I'm so tired of the left and right and the fighting and bickering about issues, going back and forth, nobody ever really putting plans forward. They run for office and they talk about, well, I want to bring the jobs back, or more money for schools, and I'm going to bring the high school education rates up, but there's never a plan on how to do that. It's basically, we need more tax dollars and we can make this happen. And I could probably speak for most anybody that's going to listen to this video. They're tired of paying taxes, more and more taxes, and their standard of living is not going up whatsoever. As a voting public, I think that we seem to think that we have to put somebody into higher offices in this state, such as governor and things like that, that we need to put a doctor or a lawyer or a large business owner or some sort of intellect into office. We've been doing that for a long time, and it's gotten us nowhere. You know, everybody went to school with or knows people that got straight A's, seem to be intellectually so far ahead of everybody, but they didn't have any common sense whatsoever. And even in high school, you know, they did not understand the more common, the more normal students. They were already out of touch. And I feel that that's exactly what's happening with many, excuse me, of our politicians as well. They get into office, or they run for office, and they stand up there. They already are out of touch. Okay, they're already making an income that far exceeds the normal people. Even if they came from humble beginnings, they might not have forgotten the struggle or where they came from, but they have lost touch with it. And the longer they've been away from it, and the more that money that they have made, and I'm not disparaging people for making money and becoming wealthy, I think that's a good thing, but they do lose sight of that struggle when they're not worried about, you know, how much of their paycheck is going to pay bills, how much is going to get the kids' clothes, how much of it, is going to end up to hopefully pay rent on time. That's a lot more of the reality of most of us. So with that in mind, I was thinking to myself, for a position like governor, just a blue-collar person who's kind of got their finger on the pulse, understands technology, is able to see the whole picture, even if they wouldn't actually get into office. And I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't think I could possibly win. But I'm doing this to hopefully get enough people behind my cause that like what I have to say, to scare the living hell out of the Republican and Democrat that are going to end up running for governor, to the point that they need to maybe change how they're seeing and how they're thinking about things. Now, as I go down and start listing off some of the ways I feel that the left and right can come together on issues, I want to say this, and I cannot say it clear enough. Two things that I do not negotiate on are the First and Second Amendment. They're pretty clear. The Constitution made them really clear. I'm tired of supposed constitutional scholars, highfalutin lawyers and judges trying to interpret what our founding fathers were trying to say when they wrote the Constitution. No, it's really clear. It doesn't really take a whole lot to see what they were talking about. And as far as the Second Amendment goes, okay, we have laws right now to protect people, but they're not enforced. Straw purchasers get away with buying guns for somebody knowing full well that they're a felon. They go out and they commit a crime. The straw purchaser gets away with it. It happens all the time. Mandatory minimums are not met. People commit gun crimes, are slapped on the wrist, are thrown right back out in society to do it all over again. So these laws in Oregon, these new laws with the extra background checks, and now with someone can just call up and accuse you of going to harm yourself or somebody else, and without due process they can come in, take your guns, and yes, you will have the opportunity to go in front of a judge and state your case that you're not this crazy person, but they've already came in, they've already taken your guns, they've already been in your house, they've already violated your rights. It's a direct violation of the Constitution. So I wanted to make it real clear that those two issues I absolutely do not waver on. And as a matter of fact, as governor, I would form a committee, including someone from the NRA, to look into people who may have had a felony years ago. As long as it wasn't a gun crime or, some sort of a crime where weapons were used. But there's plenty of felonies that happened in years past. The person's been clean for, they've been a good member of society. They haven't been getting in trouble, but they did something silly years and years and years ago, and they did get a felony. I do not feel that should stop you from owning and buying and obtaining a legal weapon at some point. Anyway, the right talks about getting jobs back, bringing our industries back, and this and that. And if they get elected, by gosh, they're going to do it. Well, the reality is that the left starts putting up the Sierra Club and all these other places, and they start filing lawsuits, And any of these projects are wrapped up in court forever and ever and ever and ever. And nothing gets done. The left, they talk about how the government's going to basically take care of you and provide for you and all this. And we all know that's a bunch of crap. And it scares us to death. Excuse me. So, with that being said, a good portion of our small communities in Oregon at one time were timber towns. You know, they had mills of various sorts, logging, and all this. And because of a lot of false narratives, junk science, and also just unethical practices in logging, you know, with absolutely no care for the environment whatsoever. All of those led to the demise of the logging industry as a whole. Yes, there is still logging in Oregon, you know, Washington, but not to the degree that it was. And a large part of our logs are being shipped overseas to be turned into stuff, you know, all kinds of products, and then they're shipped back to us. They're shipped back to us for us to buy at inflated prices, where these things could be made here. The logs could be milled here. The products could be made here. This new technology with cross-laminated timber that the U of O has been working on, they're actually building multi-story buildings with this stuff in Portland, and finding that it really is the building material of the future for earthquake-ready buildings and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking about all this, and I drive chip trucks, so I'm in and out of mills, and whether it be paper mills or plywood mills or lumber mills, all the time, every day. And I'm seeing the way that the technology has caught up, and how we've made our mistakes and we've learned our lessons from years past. And I see how we can bring the timber industry back, and also not just say we're going to protect the environment, or we're not going to log with the environment in mind, but actually be able to bring these industries back, make the communities largely energy independent, bring the jobs back, and cut down on taxes where people can actually start getting ahead. You know, when these mills shut down, it leaves a vacuum in these small communities. You know, when these good paying jobs leave, you know, people end up starting to fall into poverty, and drugs start getting a hold, and lots of pregnancies, and having kids that end up on the system as far as, you know, welfare and food stamps and all this. And it's just fact. You go to any of the small towns on the coast that were once you know, timber towns, and that's what you see in a lot of them. And they're not the only places. There's towns in eastern Oregon that were timber towns. There was mining around. There was jobs, and there was industry, and they just absolutely been decimated. Well, my idea, like I said, is to bring these back, and using proceeds, work on, not just save, but work on environmental projects, and have the money for some of these positions that the left, the Democrats, feel very strongly about. You know, they want more social services. They want more government controlled and government paid health care. And, you know, they talk about the illegal immigrants here and the homeless here. And they talk about it, and they all say that something needs to be done, but nobody ever actually has a plan to help any of these people. They talk a good story, but you know, they know, these politicians know that there's not money to do this, and you can only cram taxes down the working class's throat for so long until, you know, they can't take it anymore, and things get very ugly. And I'm very afraid, no matter who's in power, which has mostly been Democrats in the state, that it's going to lead to that. And the government making mandates and making laws and then cramming them down the throats, whether we want them or not, it's leading to really bad places. And I am afraid that, you know, it's only going to be so long before things could get really ugly. And a lot on the left and these so-called anarchists and all that, they really talk about, and they want a civil war. They have no idea what a civil war even is, or what communism or socialism is. They have no idea. It sounds good, and politicians make it sound wonderful to them that the government just provides you everything, and that's not the case. They don't know what they're talking about. And us normal, whether you be Democrat or Republicans, but just the average thinking citizen knows full well that that's not going to work, and it's not going to solve any of our problems. So, as I was saying about bringing the timber industry back, a lot of these mills are powered by a boiler, and they use wood waste and that sort of thing to power the boiler, to heat the water, to make electricity, and they can make a lot of electricity. There's now the technology that you know, they have a boiler, and it's got all the scrubbers and all the stuff, kind of like the new coal power plants do, and they burn almost completely clean. And we all know that the renewable energy that they say is green and is wonderful is solar and wind power, and it's not. It absolutely doesn't work on a large scale for a large community, and it takes a lot of acreage to put up enough windmills and whatnot to provide electricity in any sort of a large amount. And to say that it's green when the components to build solar panels, to build windmills and all that stuff has to be mined. It's byproducts of the oil industry. The maintenance on them surely isn't green. So they have no idea what they're saying, but the mainstream narrative and, you know, Hollywood and people that call themselves scientists, they say that this is the best thing in the world. Well, there are other technologies like these boiler systems that do burn exceedingly clean. And we now can use every single part of that tree for something good. Other byproducts of making lumber are chips and shavings, and we haul those off and to different processing facilities to be made into paper and cardboard and MDF and particle board, all kinds of stuff. Every part of that tree can be used. We've learned how to log and do it ethically and responsibly. And I'm going to use Gold Beach as an example because I live there. But we all have heard about the, you know, threats of these big earthquakes and all of that. Well, if we were to put in a mill, plywood or lumber mill or both, in where the old one used to be, you could put the power generation plants up above it. And when it's up and running, it could provide power to a vast majority of the community. And rather, when you pay your light bill, part of it would go back into the maintenance of the facility, and we could build it to where it was an insulated system, so that in case of an EMP or you know, bad solar flares, which could take down our power grid, which is not conspiracy theory, it's absolute fact, and it's very likely going to happen. So build it insulated from that, build the power generation plant up where it's out of the way of even the largest tsunami that's possible, to where you have this big major earthquake. Coastal Oregon will be cut off from the, you know, the Willamette Valley. Help is going to be a long time coming, you know, and that's even if they're able to get helicopters or whatever airborne, because likely they won't be able to land planes unless that's, you know, on the rivers and whatnot, water planes, seaplanes, because there won't be runways and stuff left. They're going to be buckled, they're going to be messed up. So helicopters, yes, but it's going to be a long time to be cut off, you know. And the electricity comes from this area and goes out there, and when that's all done, you know, it's done. Well, if these communities were able to maintain their own power system and able to, within a few days, be able to start getting electricity and get the hospital powered up if it's there, and be more self-sufficient. And the other really neat thing with these boiler systems is not only can they burn, you know, they burn the bark and what's not used of the tree, which is almost nothing. It's basically just the bark is the only real waste. It's called hog fuel or hogged wood. But yard debris, your burnable recycling stuff, anything like that could be put into this boiler, and, you know, people, rather than having to light it in their backyard, the smoke going up in the air, it could be put in this thing. And there's a very, very small carbon footprint out of these, but it's much smaller than just openly burning in your yards. Leads to cleaner air, and it's a much better system and can provide much more electricity, regardless of the weather, regardless of anything, than wind power or solar. And as far as other issues, I have a plan for healthcare, and when I went to Senator Wyden's town hall to talk to him about the fire issues and all that, he brought up the fact that he's working on a bill to where states are able to set up their own healthcare systems, and he was suggesting that California, Washington, and Oregon kind of be the test bed for single payer in the country. And I almost fainted. And there was only, out of the room of maybe 40 people, there was only 5 or 6 of us that consider ourselves, you know, more conservative, and they were cheering and thinking it's the greatest thing in the world. They were very concerned that they didn't want the government involved in their marijuana growing operations, and they don't want the government anywhere near that. They don't want the government anywhere near this, but they sure want the government to run their healthcare system. And I don't see it as being we want the government in our lives for certain cases and out. It's one way or the other. They're either majorly involved or majorly not involved. And I feel the days, unfortunately, of having very small, limited government is over. But I do feel that folks can live a life to where the government has very limited power to say what they are and are not going to do. I feel that that can be limited to a large degree. Now, as far as healthcare, I have a plan. You know, it's honestly, I think it's better than what I've heard from either the right or left out of Washington. You know, one side, ultimately, they want single payer, all run by the government. And the other side wants to completely let the free market and everything take over. And I don't feel that either way is really all that good. I feel that clinics and urgent cares could be funded to a large part by government, because they can handle probably 95% of the stuff that goes on in an emergency room. And doctors don't do much in urgent cares and that kind of thing. It's physician's assistants. Those are really the people you see in there by and large the most often. And yes, they're much less expensive to go into, but in today's economy, still, families don't have $100 to walk in the door. And if there's any procedure or anything done, it quickly climbs to a couple $100. People don't have it, that kind of money to shell out. But just to go into the emergency room, because you've got a cold you can't kick, and they write you a prescription for some antibiotics, you're looking at $1,500 to $2,000, and that to me is absolutely insane. And in my opinion, that's in large part why health insurance has gotten so outrageous. Is, you know, people go into the emergency room. Medicaid and Medicare, same reason. They're going into the emergency room for a lot of things that could be done in an urgent care type setting. Now, with this plan, you're not kicking anybody off Medicare. You're not kicking anybody off Medicaid. But what you are doing is making it to where your health insurance is in large part for emergencies. Cancer, heart attack, broken bones that are, you know, that require surgery, more severe, for that type of thing, which is much more like your car insurance is and what health insurance should be. So if you one of the big issues with people and single payer is that when they have cancer or they have something like that, it takes them so long to get in to see a specialist and get anything done that they're dead. People in Canada are going broke coming to the United States to seek the health care they need for cancer and other maladies, because they would die if they stayed in Canada. And it's not that the health care is bad itself, it's the government, you know, their wheels turn really slow and they don't really care to get you in there. You know, once you're gone, you're one less person they have to deal with, and that's kind of how they look at it. So with my plan, insurance companies, like I said, would just be involved and do the big things. We could fund urgent cares and clinics, and I think that people that are, you know, $100,000 a year family income and under would be able to use these clinics for free. You know, as everything, people are going to abuse it, and if it becomes real obvious you're just coming in there and abusing it, then it no longer becomes free. And I don't really care what your income is, but that decision would not be made by the government. It would be made by the private company that was running the urgent care or whatever. The day-to-day operations and who and what would be done by the private company, and I really don't want government involved in it. And you know, if it's found that this company's not doing a very good job and there's a public outcry against them, well, then we have to look at changing that company, or insisting that they change management, whatever the case may be. But I think that would be one way to drive healthcare costs down, Medicare, Medicaid, as well as people that are paying for health insurance, employers that are paying for health insurance, so on and so forth. I believe that we can get these industries started back up, and as these timber companies, large timber companies, begin to build these facilities in these small towns, that it's real clear that they're going to invest in their community, fund school programs or classes in the high schools, and you know what, maybe even down to the grade schools, where these kids learn these new technologies and new way of doing things, and the new ways of you know, logging, and where you're doing it for the best of the environment. The environment comes first, and not having a knee-jerk reaction when, you know, some college student says that this owl is about dead, or whatever the case may be, and just stopping everything. No, it's going to be done by real science, by real people who have the best interests at heart all the way around. The jobs, the forest, the animals, so on and so forth. Okay, and cutting down on people's taxes because of having this large employer in there, have this employer investing in the schools, having portions of your electric bill going back into schools and funding the police department and the services that are needed in counties, cities, what have you. So I do believe that, you know, the left and the right can come together on all these issues, and I've been kind of broad and spectrum. There's more to it. There's more issues. You know, hot button topics like abortion, this and that. That there is a middle ground, and honestly, when you're debating these issues and you're making plans for the future, if neither the left or the right